Welcome to Mormon Book Reviews, where an evangelical encounters the restoration. So folks, we're going to have an experiment here. This could be a complete train wreck, but I don't care because I like having fun. And when they first gave us the premiere date for the FX and Hulu series Under the Banner of Heaven, I thought, I should do like an after show. And there's your copy. And so I was thinking, who would I like to have as a guest host? And I thought maybe every week, if this works out, I'll have like a different guest host on. But one thing I really liked was when I interviewed you, I felt like we had good chemistry. I even think like in an alternative timeline, I think you're doing a morning show on KSL.
That's it. That's it. And we're co-hosts together, I feel. Yeah.
That's right. Exactly. So Rebecca Bibliotheca, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here.
So I reached out to her this past weekend and I said, hey, would you be interested in doing the first episode of the after show of Under the Banner of Heaven? You said, sure, let's do it. So literally, I just finished watching the second episode about an hour and a half ago. And Rebecca, I guess really for me, I want to just hear from you, your take and what your initial feelings were after watching the first two episodes. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I think I've had an interesting journey with Under the Banner of Heaven. And watching the mini-series has been greatly anticipated by myself and other members of our book club. We read Under the Banner of Heaven, of one of our books, during book club last July, and spent the entire month with it, researching it, reading it. I even drove to the location where the event happened, which is in American Fork. We loved this book. Our discussion was amazing. And during that month, ironically, the news came out that there was going to be a mini series. I mean, we couldn't believe it. We just thought, this is incredible. This is going to be amazing. And we really hoped that just the way that John Krakauer did it, just some light would be shed on sort of the history of Mormonism, some things that people may not know, some things that exist that aren't really at the forefront, that sometimes, I don't know, maybe a catalyst for some other ideas, events, things to happen. So we were all really excited about the mini-series and we followed it. We posted things about it. We were ready to have a watch party on Thursday night. And then we found out kind of inadvertently that it actually dropped Wednesday night at midnight, so we stayed up late watching it. So I thought it was interesting. I thought it was an interesting treatment. That's what I'll say. I feel the first two episodes that I've seen didn't necessarily, to me, represent my experience with the book. If you know, do you know what I'm saying by that? I'm not sure if you have any thoughts on that because you've read the book too. To me, they seemed almost two very separate things. So I don't know. I'm so attached to the book that I think I'm looking forward to watching the rest of the miniseries to see if maybe it finds its footing a little more as far as getting a little closer to the book. Of course, it says inspired by the book. That doesn't mean based on the book. That's kind of something different. So I'm not sure. What do you think?
Well, I just think that the decision they made to make a fictionalized character, the Andrew Garfield character, is not an actual person that's in the book. It's probably an amalgamation of different people who are inspired. Correct. I thought that was an interesting choice because to me, I almost feel like the story is so interesting and remarkable to have to feel like you need to make a fictionalized character when you have real life characters that are pretty amazing. I thought that was an interesting choice that they made. I think that I was kind of surprised by the format. I almost felt like I was mentioned off camera, it's kind of like an anti-Hallmark movie. It has like a feel like a Lifetime movie or a Hallmark movie, and I wasn't expecting that. I was kind of thinking of something, I don't know, maybe a little more substantial than what it is. That's just kind of a minor critique, but I definitely feel that way.
Yeah, no, I had that observation too. I think that the flashback starting so quickly and so abruptly, I think that was maybe confusing, I think, to people who might not know anything about it, and even a little confusing to those of us that do, and a little disjointed in that way. And of course, I thought, okay, in the book, yes, in the book, they definitely delve into all of that, but just in a more of easing you into it and a way that makes a little bit more sense. I think with the character of Jeb, I think maybe he was trying to, his detective partner is a never Mormon. So you have that as sort of a reader's perspective, and then you have the Mormon reader perspective. And so I think he was trying to show the two different sides of it, possibly. But it was very interesting that was a choice. I'm not sure what else they could have done. And then I think, what did you think about Alan? To me, he was sort of a omniscient narrator kind of a person. Do you know what I mean? He almost took the role of describing everything that Krakauer so carefully crafted. He's there in the interview room, and suddenly his eyes glaze over, and he starts saying, Joseph Smith. It was just kind of interesting to me the way he did that, and gave these long discourses on what was happening.
Yeah, and that was what was so weird to me, is like, you literally have the blood of your wife on your shirt, and you've lost your child, and you're going to give this detective a history lesson of Mormonism. Right. I just thought that's an odd choice I think they made there.
Right. And I don't even think the detective, if that were a real scenario, he wouldn't even give any, he would say, I don't know what you're talking about. But instead, Jeb seemed like, what? It seemed like it impacted him. And I don't think it would. I think he'd just say,
yeah.
So, those were interesting choices. But again, the point is that you're trying to meld this idea that there is some history, inherent violence, perhaps a propensity for those who are looking for it. And I'm sure that's what they were trying to do.
So let's talk a little bit about some of those flashbacks, because one of the things I found so fascinating was that if you're a Nevermo and you're watching this miniseries, there's things happening, like they're showing Joseph using the hat, they're showing him prying open a rock to get the plates. Yep. They have all these, and they don't give you any context. Like, if somebody, they would have no idea what's going on. What'd you think of that?
No, and that's true. And some book club members and I were kind of all watching at the same time and talking back and forth. And one of them has a daughter who's, been out of the church for years and years. And she was texting saying, I don't understand this. What does that mean? What is that? What's that field that guy's walking over? What's that? And we of course know where it's leading, right?
Yeah.
It's almost just sort of a little tease, a little taste of what's happening, but to others it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, they just show the Mountain Meadows massacre. They show
that's what I mean.
And then like there's just so much going on, and I'm like, I wouldn't know. And I thought, what a different thing to do, because it's like, it's almost assuming like it's an audience that knows Mormon history that's going to watch the show,
right?
And I don't think there's tens of millions of people out there.
No, there's not. And I thought a lot of those flashbacks were really overdone, like almost like a telenovela or something. I mean, will there ever be a movie about Mormonism where someone doesn't scream, Joseph? There's not going to be one. So I understood what they were trying to do. And I'm hopeful for the next episodes that maybe they will flesh out those scenarios. But I think to start 10 minutes in, just hitting people over the head with this, they have no concept whatsoever. Some comments that I read from different people said, God, I wish it was just kind of the story of the murder. I mean, that's a fascinating story on its own without all this backstory. Of course, the point is eventually, the perfect storm, you understand how the backstory and led to influence that. But I'm not quite sure it worked at this point. Somebody in the book club, I'll read this quote. We were texting back and forth, and I thought this was really good. Said, Mormons will not recognize themselves in this. And I don't think they will, especially since it's 80s Mormons. A lot of people are saying, that's not us. Non-Mormons won't know what the hell this is about. Sorry if I can swear. And then ex-Mormons are thinking that this is not a great job of explaining, exactly the link between the history and some of the behaviors that we see now. So I thought that was good. It really, I don't think exactly perfectly reached any of those groups, if that's what it was trying to do. I don't think anybody would be satisfied with it yet at this point.
Yeah, and again, we got to see where this goes, and
right, we have to see where it goes, and that's what I think too. I'm going to keep watching, of course.
Yeah, same here. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, and then I guess I want to ask you. You said 80s Mormonism. Now this is your wheelhouse. This is your world. 70s, 80s. and maybe just talk about the portrayal of like Mormon households, interactions, the lingo, things that really they nailed, and other things you maybe think they didn't quite
Yeah,
get
no,
quite
that's
right.
really good. I joined on Facebook the Sunstone watch party group. It's huge. There's a couple thousand people, I think, on it now talking, and a lot of them said the very first scene of the first episode where the detectives' little girls were in their costumes for Pioneer Day, and some people said, "Well, Mormons don't do that." And a lot of us from my era jumped in and said, "Oh, yes, we did." And I even grew up out of state. And yes, Pioneer Day was celebrated by a parade and costumes and pioneer games in Washington State, and other people chimed in all over, "Oh, yes, we did." And that's just one example of, it was a very different church and a very different world back then. Another criticism was Mormons don't go around saying brother this, sister this, brother this in everyday life. Well, they did. My parents, I mean, at least and again, all this is anecdotal, right? I grew up in Washington State, but my parents would pretty much only patronize people that were Mormons. So to go to the dentist, my mom would say, you're going to Brother Pratt's this afternoon, and you're going to get your teeth cleaned. It wasn't you're going to the dentist, you're going to Brother Pratt's. So those scenes that may seem kind of awkward, where they're calling each other brother and sister, that was my world when I grew up. Everybody was brother and sister, even in a professional context. And everybody, if they'd been a bishop before, were still bishop, hello bishop on the street. So I don't know. I don't think it quite is that way today, but that language, talking about Heavenly Father all the time, I would say I was raised by Orthodox Mormons, maybe a little bit more than others mainstream, but in our house, you wouldn't just say President Kimball. You would say our beloved prophet, President Kimball. That just rolled off the tongue. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it was just so for me and the way I grew up, everything was fairly accurate. I can see how it sounded awkward in the miniseries to people that had not experienced that. But in my era, in the 80s, growing up in a very consolidated Mormon pocket, it was definitely like that. Brother this, sister that, beloved prophet, Heavenly Father, all of that. So,
well, yeah,
yeah.
I'm anxious to get all these different perspectives, and I'm going to try to get
Exactly.
like Benjamin Schaefer on to give the political
Yes.
view on things, like how they're shown, and
Yeah.
other people. And I've actually, Thomas Murphy's reached out to me, the anthropologist, so maybe we'll do something about it
No,
too.
I think that's great because everyone's watching it from different eyes, right?
Yes.
I'm watching it thinking, so when it happened, 1984, Pioneer Day, I can't remember if I was in Utah or about to be in Utah. We were driving to Utah for my freshman year. I had early start. I was going to move into my apartment. So I was here either that week or like the week after. So it was on the news. Things were happening. My relatives were all here in Utah. And the number one takeaway that I understood and understood for decades is that this was a case of fundamentalist Mormons doing this. I had absolutely, whatever that word means, even, we know that's an extremely nuanced word, right? There's so many different things you could say about that. But it wasn't until decades later. I mean, I don't even know if it was until I read the book last year that I understood, these were Mormons, what you would call mainstream in a regular ward. One of them was a counselor in a bishopric just a couple miles from where I live now. I did not understand that. Definitely the narrative was either purposely crafted or just kind of let people, arrive at that on their own, that this had nothing to do with the mainstream church. This was a, something with those guys, those fundamentalists. So, and I think this miniseries is trying to definitely make a difference, a distinction with that, if that makes sense. They're showing Jeb, he's a mainstream Mormon, right? He's got the Relief Society coming over, he's got the nice house, he's got the cute kids, and then you've got all this talk of men with beards, right? That kind of thing. So, which is kind of weird. People were saying, what does that mean? But I understand that point. They were trying to make the difference. There's this kind of Mormon, and then there's this kind of Mormon, and he's trying to somehow show that. So I don't know if you thought that device worked or what your feelings were on that.
Yeah, it was kind of came out weird, like they're like Bible or Book of Mormon prophets.
Right, prophets, the beards, right. But I also don't think that people understand how in the 80s, the beard was a gift, it was a sign that you were not on board with with the mainstream church. It was a big deal. You did not have a beard. You did not bring a boyfriend home who had a beard. I mean, you just didn't do it. Today, it doesn't really matter. Today, it's very mainstream. But back then, it was definitely, my dad told me a story. He goes, yeah, a young man went into President Kimball. There's always these anecdotal, and he was a very nice young man, living his covenants, doing everything right, but he had a beard. And he went in and talked to President Kimball. And after the young man left, President Kimball shook his head and said, if only that young man knew what he was doing with that beard. Like it had some, eternal consequence. I mean, this is a story, right? That was told to me when I was a teenager. So definitely beards were a big distinction, a way to instantly look at someone and say, you're different. There's something different going on.
Yeah,
so I understand where they're trying to say that. Again, does that play to modern audiences? Or like, what does that mean? So I don't know.
Yeah, it's crazy because there's this D.L. Moody was a famous 19th century evangelist who founded the Moody Bible Institute in Chicago, and he actually spoke to the saints in Utah. He was the first evangelical to do that, I think, and there wasn't one until like 100 years later. Unfortunately, it was Ravi Zacharias. We won't get into that one, but it's so funny because I had some family that attended Moody Bible Institute in the 70s, and they had a prohibition on beards, but then they had a picture of D.L. Moody with a beard, the founder.
Yeah.
So there's cultural parallels that was going on right at the same time, even with the evangelical movement. There was this thing about beards.
There's a thing, and I think it's just, especially when the LDS Church adopted the 50s business culture, and way of dress. I think that's when it happened, and it continues today. So
let me ask you, what did you feel culturally that they got wrong? Like that you just felt like, no, that's not accurate, or
it's not accurate. Gosh.
Or didn't quite jive.
I thought the clothes were perfect as far as the 80s. I thought they did a great job with that. Gosh, that's a tough question because, I think a lot of people drew attention to the fact right? Mormons don't do that. Mormons do this, right? And the idea that maybe this is what, to people who don't pray, it looks like what they think people who pray look like, right? Okay. So right away, I think people can look at that and discount the whole series. Oh, they don't really know Mormons because they're doing this, little symbols like that, I think. Oh. So, and they may have used that just as a universal device of prayer because maybe not everybody worldwide knows that this is, they might have thought we were going into a trance or something. I think that they almost had to be a caricature of Mormonism just maybe to get their point across, if that makes sense. That's how I'm trying to look at some of the choices that they made. Okay. Again, I think the main point is that they're just trying to communicate what the book communicates, just this world, this violent world that was out there, that I have this, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say this. I sometimes say Mormons in a way I see as sleeper cells, if that makes sense, like ready to, and I would count myself among this back when I was, a true believing Mormon, but ready to spring into action at any moment on the word of a leader or a prophet or something. And I only say that anecdotally. If I could share this. So my founding ancestor was just a regular guy back in Michigan in mid 1830s, had a wife, had some kids. The missionaries found him. I think it was Parley P. Pratt and Orson Hyde who went to Michigan. By 1844, he had joined. He was following the path of the saints. He was in Ohio. He was in Council Bluffs. He made his way. He got another wife. He made his way to Utah. Within about 12 or 13 years, he was on the High Council where they decided to exterminate the immigrants in the Mountain Meadows Massacre. And he was the one that came out and announced to everybody, we've voted, the immigrants have been committed to destruction, is what the official wording was. And then he proceeded to, on the federal arrest warrant, he's listed as a shooter and a clubber. And he was one of the ones that after they shot everybody, if anybody dared to run, he would chase them down on horseback and then kill them. So my thought is, how does a normal guy walking around Michigan with a wife and kids, suddenly, a decade or so later, become this person? What is it? Would he have done something like that had he just remained in Michigan? And I think about that all the time. No one else in my family knows about him. He's just their revered ancestor. I've tried a little bit to tell them, they won't listen. But to me, I wrestle with that, normal guy, decades later, under this influence, under, the societal, the social, the cultural, kind of just, I think just squeezed to death in that environment, was able to do these things that are unthinkable to most people. So I don't know how you feel about that, but anecdotally to me, he was a sleeper cell who sprung into action when he had to, to protect what was his.
Well, that's fascinating, because one of the things that when you were first describing it, I'm thinking, and just tell me how accurate this is, but you grew up in a time when, hey, the time can come, we're going to need to move back to Jackson County.
Oh, all the time. Yep. Get ready.
And then also the idea is at any time they could bring back polygamy, and you got to be ready.
Oh, in my family especially, we had a big portrait of this particular polygamous ancestor in his prison clothes, with some of the other polygamists of the day on our mantle. Like, my parents definitely were ready. Anything can change at any minute, and we're going to return to how it was before. Yep, absolutely.
Okay, very fascinating to me. Very fascinating. Yeah, and I'm so glad I'm having you on, because I really felt like, I'm glad you're the first one, because you could give us a glimpse of that time period too.
Time period. I know, the 80s Mormon, people just don't remember. So, but I'm not sure. I mean, it's just such a dicey issue. I mean, I have a more modern example. I have a brother-in-law who was in a bishopric in California, and he met some people in his ward who were a member of a group. I don't know if the official name was the Freemen, but they operated on the idea of, are you a kingsman or are you a freeman from the Book of Mormon, right? Are you beholden to taxes and the government, or are you God's man? And he went from being just somebody kind of like you and I to somebody that eventually went to jail because of these views. They would go to the Capitol building and protest. He stopped paying taxes. He tried to make himself sovereign. He tried to, and there were a lot of people involved in this, kind of this underground. He would teach other people how to do it. I remember one day, and we were visiting him, I was writing out my mortgage check, and he goes, you don't have to do that. I'm like, well, of course I have to pay my mortgage. He goes, oh no, you don't know. God's way is a higher way, right? I'm like, what are you talking about? And he did, and his family got involved, and he eventually went to jail for some of the things that, he was doing with the tax evasion and stuff. And while he was in jail, this Freeman group from his ward supported his family. So, here's again, a normal guy goes to church, gets involved with people who are using scriptures from the Book of Mormon, scriptures to back up this life view, and his life definitely took a turn and changed forever. So I think maybe the idea is that if maybe you have a propensity to this, there's definitely doctrinal, history, scriptural basis to act out on these things. Maybe what it is.
So just so you know, in the 70s, my family knew a lot of people that went to jail because they refused to pay taxes. So another parallel between my world.
Right, it was a huge thing. And I'm not saying it's just Mormonism. I mean, I'm certainly not saying that. I'm just saying that those things exist and you get involved. And I mean, I've always thought a lot of now here's an example. I never really thought of the churches having a violent past. I kind of had to learn about that. And then even when I learned about it, I thought, oh, that's very much in the past. I was a primary teacher for a very long time. That's teaching youth in the church. And it started to dawn on me. They'd have little meetings where kids would get up and give a little talk to the other kids, right? Just a little. And one summer, it was all about pioneers. Bring your pioneer history story. So we'd have these little kids get up, and the stories they were telling were very violent. I mean, I'll never forget this one little boy getting up and he's saying, my ancestor hit Joseph Smith. The mob was after him, and there were shovels and guns and pickaxes, and they came to my ancestor's house, and my great-great-great-grandma hit him in the bed, and they dragged the family. I mean, he was telling this little story, and I just kind of removed myself for a minute and thought, this is not a story for a kid to be telling. I mean, it's very violent, yet it was a part of his history. Just like me, I grew up on those stories. They were inspirational. They were not violent. They were inspirational.
Wow, fascinating.
So yeah, it's very interesting.
So I'd like to get, because you're a woman, and I'd like to get a female perspective on how you feel the women were portrayed. First of all, how accurate is the portrayal of how the women were treated? Like, was this did some of this ring true? How do you feel how accurate it reflected that?
Right. No, I think that's another major theme, and I've even heard that the producer, that he wanted to really push that forward, just because that's Brenda's story, right? She was a feminist Mormon woman in the 80s, which is very difficult. So, and I told you some of my crazy stories back in our past interview. Yeah, it definitely was fairly accurate, I think, and we just all kind of accepted it. We didn't know any different. It isn't until you get a little older where you go, that was interesting. But not so much in the past. I'll tell you an interesting story of just maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, where one of my sons was being ordained to be a teacher. That means that during church, in his little group in priesthood, where only boys go, they'll say a prayer to advance into the next level. So he's going to be a teacher. So anyone can attend, and it happens during church. And usually you're called out of the class that you're in. They'll come in, you'll say, hey, Rebecca, your son, we're going to do the ordination. So go ahead and come down to this room. So the whole family gathered. So I have all sons. So me, my husband, all my sons, we all walk down toward this classroom where my son's in the classroom, and we're going to go inside and hear this blessing for him. So my husband walks in, the teacher opens the door. There's a bunch of 13, 14-year-old boys sitting in chairs, including my son. There are some other men leaders. My husband walks through the door. My older son walks through the door. My littler son, who's 8, walks through the door. I start to walk through the door, and the person in charge goes, oh, no. We're doing priesthood business now for a minute. We're going to leave you out here in the hall. We're going to shut the door, and then we're going to let you in when we're done. And he shut the door. And I just stood there going, what? My 8-year-old, I'm sorry, I'm 50 something. I've got a freaking master's degree. I'm a professional. Yeah, I just started running through in my head, what is happening, And my 8-year-old could go in and hear whatever it was that they were doing, and I couldn't. And so they opened the door, they let me in. We participated in the blessing, But I thought, in the past, if that had happened to me, even maybe 10 or 15 years earlier, I probably would have gone, okay. But it just doesn't fly. It does not fly today, where no other place in your life, hopefully, women are relegated like that, And so interestingly, like I said, I taught primary. I taught 7-year-old girls and boys, and we had a lesson on the priesthood. There was not one girl in that class that didn't think they all thought they were going to get the priesthood. Isn't that funny? That tells me that their parents at home were not explaining, because how do you explain to your daughter when in every aspect of your life, you're as good as a boy, you can do whatever you want, the sky's the limit, everywhere. Yet in this avenue, you have to say, but not that. So it tells me that things are changing, and what's interesting though is the little boys in the class, they all knew the girls weren't going to get the priesthood. And they told, you're not going to get, it was really, I almost felt like I'd started talking about sex or something. I had to say to them, go home and talk to your parents about this. But yeah, I know things are changing, because women are just not going to have it. They're raised in a totally different way. In the 80s, it was what it was. We just didn't think much about it. Oh, the boys get all these activities, and the things that we're doing is, I remember passing off a requirement for one of my church classes where I learned to paint my fingernails. It's a different day, right? So I've always thought somebody should make TikTok videos or something about what the 80s church was like, because it was very different. And people don't understand that it's a fluid thing, it's just flowing. The church is very different. So, and you can, like, my parents live, I would say, in the 60s church. Okay. They still think, those things are what's happening now. They haven't really updated, if you will. But I don't know, is that true of other religions? It probably is, that there's a way things were, and then things morphed culturally, societally. Do you find that?
Oh yeah, there's definitely, yeah. And I think the evangelical church is going to be radically different 20, 30 years from now than it is now.
Oh, absolutely. And it's all based on culture. I'm not saying, oh, this is only Mormons. It's the world at large. Absolutely. That's exactly what it is. So
yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So real quick, so folks, what we're doing, this is a synopsis of episodes 1 and 2 of Under the Banner miniseries. It's on Hulu and FX here in the United States. Those of you who are watching in other countries, check whatever service is provided. The episode 1 was called When God Was Love, and episode 2 is Rightful Place. Rightful Place, so interesting. We're just talking about women.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask you, you have this book club called the Good Book Club, and you actually, like you said, it was last year that you did
In July.
Okay, so you did Under the Banner of Heaven, and I just kind of want, maybe you could tell me about the impact that the book had on the group. Like some I'm sure had already read it, or you read it for the first time. Maybe just give me a little idea of what the reaction was to the book in the book club.
Yeah, it was, I would say, one of our pivotal books. A lot of people, the book club is made up of people who are post-Mormons, meaning, they've sort of left being a practicing Mormon. Of course, we are all still cultural Mormons, right? Especially when you leave decades into your life, right? Also, some are nuanced Mormons, meaning that they're still attending, spouses are attending, but they do have questions. So for some in the book club, they knew a lot of the information in this book. They knew a lot about some of the, I hate to use the word violent, I guess that's the only word you can use, some of the violent history of the church, Mountain Meadows, some of the things that happened in Utah Territory, what it was really like. Some knew, others knew nothing about it. And you could tell, having read the book, that their minds were just blown. They really had no idea what was really happening. They didn't know that in the federal government, they were having meetings about the Mormon problem. Here's this group out here, this theocracy, right? Completely apart from the United States, considers themselves not part of the United States. Is this a threat? Is this an ongoing threat? Is this something that we need to worry about? It just kind of opened all our minds to the fact that things aren't the way we really thought that they were. After this, in August, we read Blood of the Prophets by Will Bagley, which was a very in-depth look at Mountain Meadows Massacre. And we went to the site. So these two books together, it was heavy. Like we spent that whole end of the summer just really delving into that early Mormonism and just some of those situations that are just so difficult. So the couple books we did after that, we had to pick some lighter things, secular Buddhism, so that we could from what we learned. But it was a revelation to a lot of people, and it just helped us, I think, understand our ancestors better. It helped. For some, it was frustrating because we felt like a lot of our family members, a lot of people in your average world, they don't know about this. I think you do need to know who you were to understand who you are, good or bad. And they didn't know, and they don't know. I faced that with my family, trying to introduce some things, and they just won't hear anything about it. So, but I think it's important. And I know we can't judge everybody back then by today's standards, anything like that, but it's important to know. I think it really is. So, and that's why this mini series is awesome. The book was incredible. The mini series, I think, is going to just open up a lot of conversations. And that's what I see on a lot of the threads that I'm reading in the forums and things. Well, everybody's not on board with everything in the miniseries so far, as far as choices and devices and do they work or do they not work. I think everybody agrees that this is important information to try to get out in some way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting. You had asked me off camera if you read anything. I've always had this thing. I do book reviews, but I don't read movie reviews.
You don't read it
reviews. I want to go in not knowing anything about it as least amount as I can. So I know I've seen some of the headlines and some of the critiques. I know Jim Bennett said it's garbage and all this kind of stuff.
Yes.
And so I'm like, okay, but I don't really want to be influenced. So like I said, it's only been about 2 hours ago when I finished part 2. Yeah, and I love this. And folks, just so you know, this is not an anti-Mormon show. As a matter of fact, I think you all know that. This is a channel that's talking to all the voices of the Restoration. And Rebecca is one of those voices. And she gives us some great insights to that time and era, some of the doctrines that were taught, some of the beliefs. And even it just sounds so interesting that there's a lot of your familial history and your personal history that seems to parallel a lot of what's going on in this program, which I find truly fascinating. So I want to thank you for giving me that perspective as well, because again, I'm genuinely curious about these things. I don't live in Utah. you know,
Right.
I'm not plugged in. I'm plugged in some ways, but I'm not plugged in that way. So thank you for giving me your unique perspective on this.
Well, that's what makes you perfect, Stephen, though, is to talk to everybody, because you do, you have an understanding of everybody. You listen to everybody's points of view. You can talk to everyone, which is great. You're universal. So
Thank you. And I'd like to get a faithful Mormon on. Maybe
yeah,
I should have Jim Bennett come on, you know, and
you know what? You absolutely should. I'm going to keep watching all the ones that you do, because I think everyone's going to have a completely different take on it, and we can all learn things from those different points of view.
yeah, yeah. And now I know now some of my previous guests have been on and like Kimberly Smith, and she said that you should not watch it because they're going to be showing the temple ritual.
Oh,
And I just want to say I respect. I mean, I don't like to
right.
go and talk about that stuff. As a matter of fact, I've never watched the stuff that was put up on New Name Noah. I've never even watched the
Oh,
hidden video footage because I feel
have,
icky
yeah.
about it.
Have you ever seen Big Love, the
Oh yeah, of
HBO
course I've
movie?
seen that.
Yeah, and I remember that was kind of a big, shocking scandal. They were going to show that, and they read letters from the pulpit, don't watch that.
Yeah.
And I watched the series Big Love. I actually enjoyed it, and I watched that scene, and I mean, I thought it was very respectful. It was just about a woman who was going to be leaving Mormonism to become more of a fundamentalist, knew she couldn't attend anymore, and wanted to go one last time, if I remember correctly. And to me, it wasn't sensationalized at all. It just simply showed what it was. And then you can beg the question, well, should they even show that or not? And I don't know if they're going to sensationalize it here. I mean, if they do some kind of like the flashbacks, those are kind of, maybe that won't be good, but I don't know. I'm not sure how I feel. Of course, when I watch Big Love, I've always been kind of I don't know, kind of a cultural Mormon, but not a believing Mormon, if that makes sense. Even since I was a little kid, I just have always been in it, but not of it. So I'm sure I didn't feel the shock that other people would feel over it. But we'll see how they treat it. We will see. And I saw that on Hulu, to advertise it, the scene from the temple was so that's very, I'm sure, upsetting to a lot of people that are still.
And I just want to be sensitive to that,
Ex-
because again, this is not a channel to exploit
no,
or make fun, and
no,
just be respectful
nope.
and hear
It's just
people's
a dialogue,
perspectives.
absolutely,
And I
between
figure
people.
there's millions of people watching this series, and I'd like to get all the different perspectives to kind of just share their values and their views on the whole thing. Again, it's the Under the Banner of Heaven series. I do recommend the book. As a matter of fact, I did in first season, did a book review, and actually it's been getting a lot of views lately because of it's people are searching for it. So I'll check out my review. That's during my hostage video period when all my book reviews look like hostage videos. So it's the production values aren't quite there, but I gave it a good
Everyone
review.
starts somewhere, right?
That's
So,
right.
and the content was awesome. So maybe you should do another review of it, a part 2, and delve more into it,
Yeah.
because maybe you should, now that it's getting so much play. So yeah, I would highly recommend the book too. I mean, to me, the book and the mini series almost, they're so different. Like, they're very different. So
Okay. Yeah, I picked that up too.
yeah.
So you're with the Good Book Club, and you have a Facebook group. That's how people can reach you. The
Yeah,
book club.
look us up, the Good Book Club on Facebook, or the Good Book Club on Instagram, or they can just try to find us. So
Yep.
we have a lot of fun. We're reading Escape from Camp 14 this month, which will be really interesting, and having the author Blaine Harden on to talk. So we read all kinds of different books, from Mormon history to just anything.
Yeah, it's interesting. And of course, I found you guys last year, and
You did.
I was
And
just
then you
this
got
tiny
too
little.
famous and too busy to attend all the time. No.
I know. I feel bad.
No,
It's
you don't have to feel bad, because you're very much a part of it. And like I said, my husband watched, if you guys haven't watched his Mormon Stories podcast episodes, a plug for that. You've got to watch them. My husband watched all of them, and he quotes her all the time in book club and everywhere. So a lot of good stuff there. If you guys have not watched that, please tune into that. Stephen can tell you more how to access those, but they were amazing. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty remarkable, the amount of views it's gotten, and hearing from people throughout the world.
Yeah.
And now it's just I've become part of the conversation. My channel has, and it's just fascinating to have, like, a little over a year later, and it's impactful.
Well, we need you. That's what I'm saying. You see all sides of it, and you talk to everybody, and you're very respectful of everybody, and you're not going to have somebody on and railroad them into a corner or confront them. You're going to sincerely listen to their view and help them get their message out there, and that's what's needed for sure.
Yep. And I want to give you guys your props to the Good Book Club, because like you said, authors. So now you guys have gotten to the point now where you're actually having the authors of some of the books that you're reading coming on. And you also do like, it's usually like, what Sunday every month is it you guys usually meet? Is it second or
We're on
third?
the second Sunday of each month at 11 a.m.
Okay,
So
and that would be Mountain Time. And
Mountain
then
Time, sorry, yes,
and then
Mountain Time.
sometimes you'll do weekday things where you'll have like a special presentation given by an author or somebody, like you did. I sat in on one last fall about the Mountain Meadows Massacre.
Yep, do.
So
Yep. We have a series that we call the Good Book Club for Post-Mormon Dummies. And dummies in the way that sometimes Mormons being raised the way they were don't necessarily know some things they should know. We've had episodes on how to have conversations with people of a differing opinion, or an episode about evolutionary psychology. Next month, we're having one that we're calling Coffee 101.
oh
Isn't that funny?
yeah.
Because literally, you know, if that's something that you now want to try, if you're more of a post-Mormon, you have no idea how to do it or how to order it, right? You go to Starbucks and you're like, can I have a fettuccine Alfredo? You know, you don't even know what's happening. So anyway, it's all just kind of fun. And mostly we just like to get together and talk because it's a really fun group of people. So
Well, Rebecca Bibliotheca, thank you so much for coming on to the program. This wasn't a train wreck. It turned out just fine.
I don't think it was a train wreck, but it never is with you at all. So, and I'm super excited to see who you have on next. So this is going to be great. All the different perspectives. I love it.
Great. Yeah. And I don't know if anybody else is doing it. So, hey, you know, folks, check out Mormon Book Reviews. Don't forget, folks, that I have a Patreon page if you want to help support the channel. Also, PayPal if you want to give a donation. We're on all the major podcast formats now. You can reach me at mormonbookreviews@gmail.com. Also Mormon Book Reviews, www.mormonbookreviews.com is going to be we're converting it into a merch store. So you can buy hats and shirts and coffee mugs. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks we'll have that up and running.
Merch now? I'm
merch.
gonna have to get a mug. That's my signature thing. I always have a different mug. I'm gonna have to get a mug for sure. That's awesome.
That's awesome. So anyway, folks, things are going great. I really I'm looking forward to getting your responses to this video. Like I said, this is kind of an experiment. If this goes well and I get good responses, then I hopefully will, for the next 5-6 weeks, we'll be doing this. So Rebecca, thank you so much for coming on, doing a real solid for me. And everybody, you all have yourself a great day.